All right. We're back online and super exciting to be here also on our part. There's a slightly less people in this room than in the intro videos of the event, but hopefully many more of you online. My name is William von der Pahlen, and as Meri mentioned, I'm the co-host of a Finnish podcast called Futucast. And that's the reason why I'm here and have the honor to interview two top-notch guests on a very interesting topic tonight. So our topic is going to be corporate responsibility, thoughts for the future. And with me I have Niina Ratsula and Miika Huttunen. And I thought we could start off in a true podcast style, even though the setup is quite panel discussion-like. We could try to make this into a podcast still. We always start our podcast with giving the responsibility to the guest, of course, and maybe we could start off by a short introduction of you, Niina.
Thank you, and it's a very pleasure to be here. So I guess the reason why I'm here is that I'm the co-founder of the Nordic Business Ethics Network. With my colleague Anna Romberg, we have been studying workplace ethics in the Nordics. And alongside with that, I'm an entrepreneur and a researcher, and I've spent most of my times after or since I graduated, I've been in the big corporations and being part of the corporate social responsibility programs and running the ethics and compliance programs. But for the past 2 years, I've been running my own business and trying to understand, what's happening here in the Nordics in terms of ethics and corporate social responsibility. So very happy to be here.
Yeah, and it says a lot that you can make a business out of it. It just shows that there is.
It's the best time to do business
exactly.
out of it. So yeah.
And Miika, you obviously you run Slush. Most people probably know what Slush is, but in your own words.
Yes, in my own words, who am I and what is Slush? Let's start with Slush. Slush is community with mission to create and help founders to change the world. Really similar fashion like Aalto is doing, but kind of like a bit larger scale. And obviously this year was really interesting. We started to plan the event towards this November. Already in late March, we decided that okay, this year is definitely not for the events, especially at the scale that Slush is, and we canceled the event. We're pretty quickly in the situation where the 95% of the revenue was gone. We didn't have our main product, and we were thinking like, what to do now? But I think in a similar fashion as it in Aalto ES, it's in Slush DNA that we want to solve things. So we built some new products. Other than that, my name is Miika. I usually try to learn to say who am I a bit differently than just my age and what I do, but let's go with the traditional model. So the CEO right now used to be the COO at Slush, then did some partnership work, have studied finance, got slightly bored of it, changed to design and business analytics. I also used to be founder of Vaasa Entrepreneurship Society, so I have huge respect for all the work that Aalto ES does, and I truly admire for you pulling this event together. And other than that, I would say I'm extremely curious about like interactive entertainment. So whether it's like games or computer graphics, and maybe in games, especially esports.
Yeah, I remember in March when you canceled the event, and everyone was like, "Ooh, that's gutsy and quite early." And obviously now looking at what's happening, that was the right call, since there's probably not going to be that much of a better situation later on. But you mentioned you're building something new, and maybe we can take just a short possibility here to tell everyone what Slush is doing, because there's some pretty cool stuff coming out all the time now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of went through hundreds of ideas in April with the small team and tried to figure out like where we're actually good at and what we can actually pull in this timeline. And we were not that excited of turning Slush to 2 days, just a 2 days online event. We were more interested about like, what if we build a community where you can kind of like interact with investors and other relevant people all the time around the year, but also we do what we're good at, so events. And we built Node by Slush, which we launched in the summer and opened a couple months ago. And basically, it's a created community for founders and investors, where you can kind of like meet your next investor. But also, we do over 100 sessions with the leading entrepreneurs and investors, where you can sit down on your sofa and discuss with some of the best entrepreneurs in the world and ask questions. So that's what we're doing this year.
Yeah, that's great, and let's hope there will be the main event, but Node will be something you can keep alongside that in the future. But on today's topic, then it's quite a broad topic, so we need to pace ourselves a little bit and make sure we don't go all over the place. But corporate responsibility, and that's something it seems that's a discussion that's being it's more and more common, it seems, every year now, and for a good reason probably. But I thought we could start off by just maybe defining it, or as far as you can define it. I'm looking at you, Niina. But maybe giving a bit of a background in terms of why it matters, what it is, and why companies need to be responsible in the first place.
Yeah, actually, I think it's a good question, how to define it, because I think many define it as the things that corporations can do in addition to comply with the laws and regulations. And I think in the Nordics, it's sometimes even tricky to think that what to do in terms of responsibility, because we are very good in following the laws, and the Finnish person and Finnish company, it's like law is something that it's unnegotiable. So we do that, but then sometimes it's very difficult to then define. So what do I do above that? And just to kind of define it briefly, so it can be divided into 3 different elements. So what do you do in terms of the social responsibility, in terms of the environmental responsibility, and then in terms of the kind of how do we act as a in part of the society. But yeah, it's blurry word, and also we mentioned the topic of business ethics, so that's all another question on how to define the ethics and the responsibility. And for me, I think it's and what I want to talk about today is also this ethics side, because that is actually something that relates to you and me when we as an individuals make decisions and consider what is wrong and what is right, and that's the very foundations on also when we talk about what corporations can do to be responsible.
Is it usually like the on top part, the ethics side? So that's not necessarily complying with the minimum laws, but it's about genuinely caring and defining some form of code of conduct for your company, and maybe more value tied somehow.
Yeah, and also what I say always is that what's legal may not always be ethical. So also I think that's one of the issues in the Nordics, that sometimes we justify what we do, that we didn't do anything illegal, but from the corporate social responsibility point of view, it might be something that's considered rather unethical.
Yeah. Why do you think it matters, Miika? Obviously, most people today agree it matters, but in at the end of the day, companies are still just it's just people working together towards a common goal, and you can choose to be part of it or not be part of it. So why is it a question we're debating at all?
Well, how I can define what is being responsible is like it's about ensuring your company is benefits and the surrounding society benefits in the long term. So kind of like it's response to that question in a way. But what I think what is often discussed, and by no means I'm actually expert on this topic, but I see hundreds of companies each year, like whether they're small or big, and I think what is often discussed, undiscussed in this is obviously first of all the financial responsibility, kind of like is your company profitable, and is it actually profitable in the long term, because that allows you to actually exist and also in many ways ensure other aspects. But to be honest, what I'm seeing right now, especially in that startup and tech community, is like really holistic transition to something what used to be called, and this is probably not no news anymore, but was actually maybe a couple of years ago, is that companies are transitioning from being obviously this like shareholder only to multi-stakeholder approach, which especially in the tech and startup community means that you don't just only have responsibility actually creating that financially responsible company for investors, but also you're responsible for the surrounding society, the planet, your employees. And I think it used to be a marketing speech, but now it's actually directly connected to what is your actually shareholder value. Who do you actually get the best talent to your company? And kind of like how you are seen. And I think that kind of is the reason why it's important.
Yeah, and I agree. I think there's been, and even though it's not, news anymore, and that theory of stakeholder value and you have business schools that draw the circles and all that. We've all seen that if you've gone to business school, but that's still something that's been lacking in real life. It's mainly been about shareholder value, and it's good. It's a good thing you pointed that out. Obviously, it matters. We can't, it's very important that companies actually make a profit. Otherwise, there will be no company. But it seems there's actually a big shift happening now, and our generation and younger people now moving into companies are being quite critical of the mission and the values, and maybe we have a choice to do that now as well. Back in the days there wasn't that much awareness of those things, and you spent your whole life at the same company, and now people are wording with their feet, and we have a cancel culture and everything. Maybe sometimes it's it's a bit too much, but it's still changing quite a lot. So it seems companies are understanding that. But since it's a very broad subject, we agreed beforehand that we'd focus on one aspect of the three parts you defined. We can obviously tap into the other ones as well, but maybe the most pressing question at the moment, not in business but in general, is climate change, and that's obviously a huge part of the responsibility of the companies. So maybe we could tap into that. And do you, Niina, have like, do you wanna get started on this topic? Just what is the state at the moment? Are companies understanding that they actually are a part of this equation too, and not bystanders?
Yeah, I think the change has been huge in recent years. If we think about the amount of companies who start their corporate responsibility work and their programs and start to really think that kind of what is the purpose of this company, and how am I as a company impacting this planet and so on. So I think it's been a huge change. Although I see that it's still I think, well, whoever is listening today, the younger generation, so for you this is like a common sense. But if I think about the companies I work with, and still yet there is most of the people at work are the generations that have been taught in a little bit different way. So I see that there is a lot of work to do in terms of really understanding what can be done and what shouldn't be done, and how to really make the business strategies to actually tackle the real issue here.
Yeah, is this kind of the change we're seeing, is it more related to small companies and startups, or is it something that's more general but it just takes time, and in every segment basically there are companies that are lagging behind? Have you seen, Miika, that you work with obviously big companies as well, you have them on the investor side or on the advisory side. Do you think there's a difference between younger companies and the more traditional ones?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. I think you see it faster in startups and in smaller companies, especially in tech startups, because like what I'm witnessing right now is that kind of like what I said earlier, the only way to attract right now the best talent is kind of like to have a really clear purpose behind your company, and also like doing well on these discussions and kind of like integrating also to your core business. I can see it also with the bigger companies that we're doing. They're increasingly interested to like finding companies to invest who are addressing these issues, but also like trying to understand like how they can like that maybe one example is like the Finnish project called Upright, which are like trying to quantify impact, and it's pretty. They're getting a lot of traction from larger players as well who want to either invest or just like understand better like how they're doing. But I would say like it's really visible in smaller companies, but most likely takes time. The bigger players.
Yeah, there's been like really great stories on really startups that really starts by trying to solve the issue and really coming up with these amazing ideas. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and I think you need to be fair to bigger companies as well. Obviously, if you start from scratch, it's quite easy to have good values and modern values. But if you're around since 1880 and started by selling oil, it's going to take some time, and you can't crash the plane in one day. You need to transition slowly. But
that's actually a challenging thing because although I'm a strong believer in creating new companies as a way to change the world, and also like creating new innovation. But the fact is that climate change is like an urgent threat, and we kind of like had to fix it yesterday. And the time that it takes to actually company to incubate and to reach a scale that it will actually have a wide scale impact. It's roughly 6 to 12 years between that. Maybe 6 years if everything goes really well. So kind of like the transition has to start from the bigger companies if we actually truly want to fix, in this case, for example, climate change, but many other issues. So, and also from the governmental level. So it's a tough question, but understandably it takes more time with bigger players.
Yeah, but that's true. You need the impact still. So it's not an excuse to not do anything. That we're too big, we'll get there. Maybe call me in 10 years. So.
But kind of like to add on, I think a great example is like the upcoming speaker, like Tere from Helen Ventures. Like that's great example of how you can do it.
Yeah.
Start by investing to these companies, and while also integrating everything to your core business.
Yeah, exactly. How do you see the division of basically, whose responsibility is it to solve this? Obviously, it's everyone's, but who's ultimately going to solve this? Because this is debated quite often that, you have the governmental level and that there's a strong call for, nationwide or European-wide or even worldwide, of course, collaborations on these. That if you take a nationalistic approach and try to solve everything within your country, that's not going to cut it because there's always some country that's not going to be as interested or have the same incentives as you do to actually solve the problem. But then sometimes, I feel the responsibility is put on the consumers that, hey, consume better and don't make stupid choices. And that's also that doesn't seem like the only way to do it because, sometimes you can't choose because you don't have information or resources or whatever. And then we get back to companies should do it. And so how do you see this? Because this is quite a tricky situation that what is the division, and it's not like a percentage amount, but how should we tackle this and start solving this? Because it seems like it's not going to be a government that creates the newest carbon capture innovation, but they still need to facilitate somehow the surroundings to do that.
I think we need, or I know this is a very lame answer, but in a way, what I believe is that I believe that the world will be a better place when we kind of reform the stories that people believe in, whether you're an business leader or a consumer, but how we behave is basically based on our values and beliefs for what we believe that is worthwhile doing. And the whole capitalistic idea has been growing for decades and trying to tell us that, purchase and buy and be rich and get wealthy and do all of those things and the world will be a better place. And now there is this another story that actually, we will lose the world if we don't change it. But it's very heavy process, and I don't think that the story is ready yet. So it's not really concrete for you and me yet that what's the climate change is going to do. And next time when I'm in a shop, and I'll try to figure out whether I need this shirt or not. So it's there will be one voice telling me that buy two, and then the other voice will be saying that, hey, what about the planet? But still we need. Or I see that the governments and the companies have a very important role in creating the stories that people believe in, but it's not going to be just legislation or something like that, but it's a more broader story.
Yeah. No.
I agree 100%. That's really well said. I think overall, like, the division is a tough question, but I truly feel that if we leave too much responsibility on the individuals, people like us, people listening, it's not going to work, or it's not going to work fast enough. And like, I see the responsibility heavily lying on the big companies, but also the governments, and especially the companies who are built now from scratch to change the world. And kind of like one example we have my grandfather has a company. It's like this old school trucking logistic company, driving trucks. And he just received 1 month ago from a company based in Germany, who's kind of like drive this from A to B. Got a letter that, okay, you have 3 months to change like these trucks who are polluting this much to do this. And kind of like it meant that my grandfather has to kind of like get away out of 4 trucks and buy the new ones. And although it sucks, kind of like it's expensive, but kind of like that's exactly the transition that starts by kind of like these bigger player actions. And like now we are seemingly buying more trucks.
Yeah, exactly. No, but do you see the same still? We can't obviously put all responsibility on consumers, but what can you as a consumer do? Because sometimes it feels a bit overwhelming, but obviously you can, as an individual, you can, impact this and make it go faster. So what do you see as, the best ways for an individual to start affecting this discussion and making an impact?
Of course, all the consumers have the right to decide what they buy and what they want and what they don't buy. But I think we all have this personal experience that it's not that easy, because the issue is that if I ask from anyone on the line that do you think it's important to be a responsible person? So everyone wants to be responsible, everyone wants to be ethical, but that's not how we act in the real life when we are living the daily life. So it's a very, very long story because of these values and beliefs that we've spent decades for learning and so on. But yes, if the consumers won't change, so it's going to be a tough game for the rest of the society.
I think as an individual, the best things you can do is kind of like choose, join, understand, and build. Kind of like choose is about like what kind of products you buy, like on a weekly basis or a daily basis. I will now, after this FallUp event, I will go to the store and think like, okay, what I'm gonna do for dinner. That's the first step. I think the second point is like join to the companies or join to the projects that you believe in and you believe that are important for your on many aspects, but also that resonate with your values and purpose. The third thing is obviously to understand more, like just reading, processing, and just trying to get more information about this thing. But finally, and kind of like, in my opinion, most importantly, and also like what I want to say to everybody who's listening, is to build. Whether it's a big or small, whether it's a company or whether it's an NGO or whether it's a YouTube channel, the best way is to simply just starting to do something small and seeing like where it actually ends. I strongly believe like that's the best way. So kind of like choose, join, learn, or like and build.
Yeah, no, that's I agree with that. This is a big question, but let's not give it a big answer because we need to move on. But still need to ask this because you mentioned the need for a new story, and basically now in recent years there's been a lot of talk about capitalism being dead or broken, and that we need a new, better story or better system, and nothing has really emerged, or at least isn't emerging quickly enough. So do you think, because it seems to me that however bad it has been, it has also, capitalism that is, has still created also big chunks of our wellness today and the great things we have. So it seems the debate is now whether we should get rid of capitalism and find a new system, and that I think that seems a little bit odd, but isn't it mainly about updating capitalism and just providing possibilities for companies, entrepreneurs, governments to actually build new products, and if they profit on it, so be it, because otherwise people will just keep building games or something else. So yeah, I don't know. It's a kind of a non-starter as a question, but yeah.
Yeah, profit is not bad, but I think that, and as an answer, short answer to that one, so I hope that you are right, that we're just gonna need to adjust it, not to invent something completely new. But I think it's a great question to think about as the story, that what is it that it's the ultimate goal of everything, and what are the beliefs and values that drives the companies and the behaviors.
Yeah, I think I think free markets and trade is a good thing, but I think what I kind of like mentioned in my very first kind of like in the very first question is like we need this holistic change of companies addressing multiple stakeholders, but also we need better transparency. Whether it's your investments, whether it's where you use your time, or what kind of products you kind of like buy. Right now, if let's say I'm going to make some fish with some vegetables and maybe something nice, that's probably what I'm going to do this evening. It's absolutely impossible to know like about the supply chains, about you kind of like know where this was produced, but many of that information is being lacking. And if I kind of like, I have some additional capital now I would like to invest in some companies. Okay, this stock seems to be performing pretty well, and this is an interesting company, but I don't really know what kind of good things and what kind of negative things this company is actually creating out of the things that it's actually doing. So kind of like the holistic change, and then I would say better transparency, but then kind of like that kind of update.
Yeah. I really like this transparency, and I fully agree. And I think that is an issue, because for companies, the biggest problem is that when it comes to corporate social responsibility, the companies can decide on most of the things what they actually announce and tell about there. And everyone wants to build a nice story because it is a mega trend and everyone has nice things they want to share. But then what about the ugly stuff? How do we get that? And how do we kind of as a consumers also are able to see this? So it's a big question, but very important.
Yeah. Perfect segue for our next topic, transparency. Now, in the recent months, since July or so, there's been quite a lot of talk surrounding big tech companies, mainly, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google, and there was congressional hearings and all that, and then just recently there was a article also about the European Union looking into the practices of 20 big tech companies, mainly from the US. So maybe we could discuss that a little bit, because that seems like quite an interesting change, because on the one hand you have these companies who are built from scratch, who are tremendous success stories and inspirational in every way, and then on the other hand you have legislation that's lagging behind, and now we're waking up to the fact that hey, Facebook and Google and these companies have quite a lot of power, and people are getting quite worried, both consumers and politicians. and there's really no sense of transparency, as you mentioned. So how do you, Miika, see this discussion in general?
Yeah, it's actually it's really timely. It's being discussed all the time, and it's also something we're really interested at last year's Slush. For example, we had one panel discussion where there were the two founders of these like e-scooters, like Tier and Boy founders, and also regulators on the same stage. And they were kind of like discussing like which comes first, how to work together with policymakers, and also when you're a founder. So it's a tough one. Obviously, kind of like the startup mentality is also like, at least like what Facebook used to say, like build things and break stuff, and then let's see how it ends up. But obviously, that's kind of like maybe slightly outdated model. Google, Facebook, although I admire they highly, the companies and the whole story, they're causing, what I'm seeing in the startup ecosystem, they're causing some issues, especially in Europe, because like, for example, Google and Facebook combined own 60% of the marketing, kind of like marketing spend, what companies use, or in the whole world. And that kind of like affects the companies who are building consumer businesses in Europe, because the customer acquisition costs are extremely high. And I have discussed with some investors, and they have said that consumer businesses are tough right now because it's really expensive to acquire new customers, and it's kind of like related to Google and Facebook and these other platforms. So what I would like to see is kind of like some kind of intervention. I'm not sure if it means like from the EU level, like breaking up these companies, but doing something related to that. And it's kind of like pretty big task. So I'm not expecting it to happen too fast. So kind of like, I think we also need kind of like grassroots activity also to fix that issue. But it's starting to be an issue, really sure.
Yeah, and it seems like a competition issue on the one hand. Then you have the privacy issue, which you can tackle in just a bit. But then you have the competition issue where most VC funding that you raise is going straight into ads, which seems a little bit, strange in a way. And then on the other hand, it's impossible to compete with Amazon, what seems in any domain nowadays in the US. But then still, these companies were built, from scratch, and they're big employers, and they have a huge impact, and they're, big investors from mutual pension funds and stuff like that. So it's a very tricky question to approach. That can you actually regulate them, but can you maybe regulate just aspects? And maybe this is a good time to also talk about the ethics side. Is it ethical to compete in the way that these companies do?
Yeah, that is a great question, and maybe I'm not usually a fan of kind of solving things with regulations, but maybe this is one of those things where I would vote for that one.
There was actually an interesting quote, and I took the phone here just so I can actually quote this directly, and this is kind of like related to the fact that these are US companies on European soil, and what has happened now with TikTok, as it is basically becoming increasingly popular, and there has been a lot of discussion like how TikTok should behave in US. So there was a quote on Twitter by tech analyst Benedict Evans, who said, TikTok is introducing Americans to a question that Europeans have struggled with for 20 years. A lot of your citizens might use an internet platform created somewhere else that doesn't know or care about your laws or cultural attitudes. And this I think was really interesting, kind of like seeing how that, because it's a fact that most of the tools and software products that we're still using here in Europe are like commonly from, at least the big ones, from the US. So kind of like the discussion is obviously needed.
Yeah, we proposed building Eurogram on Futucast maybe a few weeks back, so maybe we need some. But that's obviously hard because all customers are already on these big platforms, and the way to acquire new customers for your new social media platforms is through the existing platforms. So it seems like a bit of a chicken and egg problem in a way. But do you think this is ultimately just a phase? You know, if you look at the S&P 500, it's changed quite a lot during the last 50 years. It used to be dominated by big oil companies. Nowadays, if you look at the S&P 500, there's not that many oil companies left. Do you think tech and big tech will be just a phase, or is this a different kind of monopoly in a way, where Amazon and maybe especially Google and Facebook with their data will continue to dominate?
I'm pretty sure that there will be. Okay, I actually will not say this because I'm not 100% sure. But the fact is that tech is the underlying tool, basically powering these companies to the scale that they are, and tech is also like one of the best ways, kind of like scalably and fast, change the world, and that's why like I'm also really interested about building tech companies and why we believe at Slush, like why they're important. But why it's not like similar like to like maybe 20 years ago, how the stock market looked like, mostly all companies, ExxonMobil and Shell and all of these, is the fact exactly that it's actually underlying tool, not like a scarce mineral or substance that kind of like eventually will end or creates pollution or other things. But the question about, if you ask me, will Facebook and Google be here in 20 years or 10 years, and if yes, at what scale, I'm not sure.
No, that's probably impossible. But you're right. It's a tool, and the asset they have is obviously the data, and that's something that has also been quite discussed now well, maybe since the Brexit campaign and Trump election, especially with the Cambridge Analytica scandals and all that. And it seems like, you know, people are waking up to the fact that yes, these companies are actually using your data in a bad way, and it does concern you, even though you are not specifically targeted or they don't build a bad profile on you, but that could happen in the future. Do you think, because this seems more urgent to me because it affects everyone straight away. Still, I would like to believe that Apple and Amazon are still, even though it's good that there would be more competition, they're still providing quite good services for many, and they're thinking about customer experience. So it's not a huge problem for the consumer per se, but the data seems like a bigger problem. So, and it's not tangible in a way. So how should we approach that question, Niina?
Yeah, I'm not sure what was the question, but I think privacy as a concept is something that it has changed a lot how we as consumers understand that, what's happened when we sign in somewhere. And for example, my generation, 10 years ago when we went to Facebook, we had no idea what was happening. And now when I work with the companies, one thing that I really like is that it's not anymore just about defending the company, and it's not all about what's happening there, but there are these rights of the not only consumers but the employees, and it's a very I think interesting kind of a situation where actually you have to, in a really new way, start to really think that how do you do this stuff that relates to the personal data, and the awareness is increasing. So I think that it's gonna be a lot of things happening during the next years.
Do you think data will become, a personal asset, and because now everyone says we are the product and you pay with your data, but we didn't really sign up for that. It's quite implicit in everything. So do you think people will make these companies pay for data in the future? Obviously, there's no way to know, but would this help, this concept, or would it make it more possible that these companies then would abuse it even more, because then they can say, hey, we paid for it?
Yeah, that's a good question, but I think that at least it is different than it was still a few years back when we didn't know what they had. So I don't know, Miika, what do you think?
I don't know. I think it's a great business idea. I would see like some kind of marketplace in the future where it is an individual like data being sold, and it's really really the tool that powers most of the companies right now. For us as well at Slush, we process like thousands of people's data every single year, and we have to like process it really carefully and be responsible. But it's also kind of the tool that drives our value creation, like who do we invite, who should meet each other, like who benefits of different things. It's all about the data. So it's an interesting question.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Personally, I don't think that will happen. It's too or anytime soon. It's a huge project to build, and then, you know, people think. I think this is one of those questions again where, on an idealistic plan, just like being very, you know, ethical with your consuming, this is kind of the same question that, hey, I still want to use Instagram or WhatsApp, and I don't really care enough to care. But so we'll see what happens to these companies. Do you have any, you know, parting words? We're nearing the end. Anything you want to leave the live stream audience with?
I think it's all said. It's been a pleasure being here.
I want to say that for all the people listening, we're living really, really tough time. And what I'm saying to my team every now and then is the fact that we're in the midst of pandemic. It's really hard to see your friends. It's really hard to see your family. So it's okay at sometimes to feel like 100% yourself and be super productive. But that's okay. And it's really important for you to understand that. And also secondly, the last part of what I said, what can consumers or individuals do? So start building things.
Great. Yeah, thanks to everyone who listened, and especially thank you, Niina and Miika, for being aboard.
Thank you for inviting.
Thanks. Take care, everyone.